get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
Happy day after Cinco de Mayo, Lions fans. Or would that be the 6 de Mayo? I'm not exactly sure. Vince Brogar, that's me. Phil Byrne over there. Phil, let's cut the Spanish and let's get into something that's more in our lane, don't you think?
Yeah. This is an English-speaking podcast, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think we have a contract with Telemundo just yet.
Exactly.
In any case, this is the first edition of May of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Again, Vince and Phil along with you. Thrilled you could be continuing to be along for the ride as you have up to this point. Believe it or not that I'm keeping count or anything like that, but we are 17 episodes deep already on Kneecaps for Breakfast. So we are just knocking them out week after week after week. And it's been a lot of fun, Phil.
Almost a full regular season. How about that?
Pretty much.
How about that?
Pretty much.
Yeah, we're about to be in the thick of the off season here then, I guess, if that's the case.
Into the wilderness, as they say. But, Phil, I should almost call you Mr. Cliffhanger Man himself, because I want to jump right into it here in that you posed a very provocative question at the very tail end of last episode that I don't think we were really able to dive into based on the lack of time that we have. But I want to jump back to that right now. So the question, in case you are a little blurry on the details here, and same with you listening on the podcast on whatever platform suits your fancy here, you had thrown out there the scenario where you would not be entirely surprised if Brad Holmes had the ability to upgrade in a key area to get a player that could help them right now if it meant sacrificing a first-round pick in next year's draft. And I thought that was such a good question. I want you to expand upon that and kind of give us your thoughts as far as what you think Holmes would do if the right player became available. Would that first-round draft pick next year be essentially used as a buying chip in order to get somebody who can help immediately?
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, Brad Holmes comes from that LA Rams school of thought, right?
FDM picks.
I mean, how many picks did they give us, in order to get Stafford? So I think you're looking at receiver, or I think you're still looking at defensive end as the 2 spots that I think would have a little bit of movement. Prior to signing his big extension, I thought A.J. Brown may have been on the block because I thought some of the Eagles' issues, I guess, that they were having, like from a chemistry standpoint, not that they were like related to him, but I was just kind of hearing, and maybe it was just internet chatter.
And they just paid Devontae Smith.
They just paid Devontae Smith as well. That maybe he wasn't, too happy to be here. I think if the Lions are going to make a deal, they want to get that physical receiver, or, if they are going to go for the defensive end, I think they want someone who's a little bit more of a pass rush. I mean, I think it's awesome what we were able to do in the secondary, but, Marcus Davenport will kind of hold down the other side from Hutch for a little bit here, but you would still like to generate a little bit more consistent pressure, I think, over there. And I know James Houston is kind of that wild card, so I don't know who that would be off the top of my head from the defensive end standpoint, unless you got some names or anything, Vince. But that was just something I threw out there because, let's be honest. Like I think it was Colin Cowherd did a top 10 poll after the draft or something where he ranked teams. And I mean, it's all speculative, and Colin Cowherd's opinion, I think he's entertaining, but I feel like a lot of times his opinion changes hourly, if not daily. But
do you know of anybody who speaks with a more almost condescending cadence as Colin Cowherd does?
Caleb Williams coming into Chicago. Yeah. But he had the Lions at number 3 in his power rankings. Number 3. So he kind of went chalk with the Chiefs at 1 and the Ravens at 2 and the Lions at 3.
Which is amazing, thinking that you've got a talking head out there who, again, this may just be for clicks or for the shock radio or what have you, but essentially saying that the Lions are the team to beat in the NFC heading into 2024.
Yeah. So that's kind of where it stands. Where if that is an accurate representation of where the Lions roster is at, then maybe you don't need it. I will say this though, he had I think Green Bay at like 5 or 6, and I think that's where most people are thinking that Green Bay is going to be. So you add in the fact that Chicago is going to have an offense that you would appear on paper at least, if everything is clicking, to be able to score a lot of points. I think people really like Jordan Love and where the Packers offense is at this point. So, Vince, I guess I'll kind of throw this question back to you then. Like, if you're Brad Holmes, do you entertain the thought of trading that next year's first round pick?
What's that song by Meatloaf that everybody likes to sing the main chorus of? I would
I
do
do
anything for
anything
love,
for love, but not that, or
but
whatever.
I won't do
Won't
that.
do that. Yeah.
I have actually been pretty surprised as to how Brad Holmes has been just throwing around picks like he has an unlimited supply, especially this year, trading up to get not one but two guys who are self-proclaimed projects in the kid from British Columbia, Manu, and Vaki, the safety slash running back slash play toy out of Utah. And it just seemed out of character for a guy who has on numerous occasions stated his desire to build this team up through the draft and continue to do so, and knowing that you're trading up to get guys who are could possibly be swing and miss guys in the guys that I just mentioned, and giving up draft capital in order to do so, because those third and fourth round picks are kind of like those trade chips that you use to throw in to move up a little bit in a draft. Hey, I'll give you my third round next year. I'll give you my fourth round next year, or I'll give you my fourth round this year, or something like that if it happens to be in an earlier part of the draft. And now you don't have that same capital to use in trades, or to, for that matter, used for somebody who can help your team for 2025's draft. So I'm kind of thinking here that might be the threshold of how ballsy Brad wants to be in a draft. I think that would completely fly in the face of his entire philosophy behind the team building, which is building the team through the draft. I also know that drafting and scouting in that portion of running a team is what Brad Holmes excels in the most. And it just seems like they'd be completely out of character to give up a first round pick for a player who could be a rental, somebody they could need to re-sign and devote more money to, even though they have just signed Penei Sewell. They just have signed Amon-Ra St. Brown, but they still have Goff to worry about whether they choose to or not later on this summer. That's going to be a decision they have to make. In any case, that just seems a bridge too far based on what I know about Brad Holmes. I think with receivers, you can still get fully functioning, serviceable receivers for a heck of a lot less than a first round pick. Somebody that can step in and make a difference for a much lower asking price than that. And I know this kind of seems a little maybe Bob Quinn-ish or something like that, but I think there's been enough of an investment made on this defensive line with the drafting of James Houston and Josh Pascal and the signing of John Kaminsky and what have you, that if you go in a different direction and make a big signing or a big trade for somebody, that's almost like Brad maybe admitting that he was wrong about those guys. And I'm not sure Brad is much of a I was wrong kind of guy. Maybe I'm reading the situation a little bit misconstrued here, but I just seem to think that giving up a first round pick in a draft that, who knows, they could still very much be in their window next year, depending on how they do this year. They might need an immediate impact kind of guy, but maybe they want to start thinking about what's going to happen once this window dissipates and they need to start restocking that war chest. I just think that's a bridge too far.
I think there's always going to be like your Jadeveon Clowneys, your um, guys of that ilk that are 31, 32, 33 that have already had that big contract that can still provide a little bit in the pass rush game that I think you can get as you get closer to camp. Now, I don't have a list of all those guys, but I think you can literally, the way that this roster is right now, I think you can at least plan on one from the receiver spot and one from the defensive end spot. Now, who knows the impact that they'll have? And, it's sometimes hit or miss whether or not, the veteran that maybe is not 100% what they used to be 2, 3 years ago, can still bring it to a contending team. But I think that's kind of more of where, at this point, at least, I think that they would be going. Interesting little nugget to kind of touch on there, but yeah,
And that's just it. Is you need to keep in mind that you're not looking for edge guy one or wide receiver one. Heck, you're probably not even looking for wide receiver two at this point. You would like to think that Jameson Williams is going to step up and really be that Tyreek Hill type threat in the offense. So if anything, you're probably looking for a third receiver, and that's if you don't even view Sam Laporta as your number 2 or number 3 guy in the passing game.
So when the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots, they had Chris Long on their team. He had an awesome career with the Rams as a Pro Bowler. He was a high pick that panned out. I think he signed like a 1 or 2 year deal with the Eagles, and eventually he got over to the Patriots too. But they were able to pair him with Brandon Graham, with a couple of these other guys that were more considered like the number one defensive end or pass rusher. So I'd have to see like what's out there on the market, but that's kind of more of like where I think the Lions probably should be looking at this point.
And we don't even know how things are going to look as we move all the way through the summer, because there always seems to be that one guy from every team when it comes down time to cut the rosters down to 53 guys who you would think there's no way this team's going to cut this guy. And they wound up becoming available, and you never know who may be for the taking come the first full week of September.
Good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Speaking of the first full week of September, that is going to be when the NFL season officially gets underway with week number 1. I presume that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to play that first game at Arrowhead Stadium in the Thursday night NBC game. And rumor has it that the Philadelphia Eagles will play the very next night on Friday night NFL football. And I can't remember, are they playing the Packers?
Yeah.
Okay, yep. So it'll be Packers and Eagles. It'll be an Eagles home game from Brazil the second night of the NFL season. So you'll have the Chiefs kick off the season on Thursday, and then you'll have the Eagles and Packers playing down in Brazil on Friday. That's really all we know at this point for sure, with the exception of knowing who the exact opponents will be. We just don't know where on the calendar they're going to be and what TV networks they'll be on or what have you. But Phil, you and I really haven't touched on next year's schedule really at all since the offseason got underway. So I want to take a few minutes to do that here and start maybe jumping from the past through the present and now kind of start to look towards the future a little bit. So here's what we know. So we know that the Lions are going to host their division rivals, Green Bay, Chicago, and Minnesota, and they'll also play at those locations as well. So there's 6 games right off the jump. Lions are going to get 9 home games this year because with that new 17-game scheduling format, it alternates with, in odd years, the Lions only get 8 home games. They play 9 on the road. And then for the even years, it flip-flops. So you get the Lions with 9 home and 8 games on the road for this year. So on top of the divisional games that I just mentioned, the Lions will bring in the LA Rams, Seattle Seahawks, Jacksonville Jaguars, Tennessee Titans, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Buffalo Bills. And on the road, it'll be those 3 divisional games I just mentioned, as well as Arizona, Houston, Indianapolis, San Francisco, and Dallas. So first impressions right there, and I know we touched on it a little bit at the very end of the season. We didn't go too far in depth with it, but right off the jump, I'm seeing numerous rematches on the schedule. And that's one thing based on the NFL scheduling model, in that the top teams play the top teams, the bottom teams play the bottom teams. That's why it was always, back in the day, it always seemed like Brady and Manning were facing off against each other every single year, no matter what, no exceptions. That's kind of why it seems now that Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are facing off against each other year in and year out, no questions asked. And now, as the Lions start to really excel and finish high in their division, you're going to start seeing them play off against other playoff teams in the ensuing year. So, Phil, your first impressions on the schedule that I rattled off, some games that excite you, and maybe some games that you are kind of hoping to see in some key positions on the schedule that is going to be more than likely unveiled in the next 10 days to 2 weeks from now. I can't remember the exact date of when the schedule will be released.
Yeah, so I think unofficially it is supposed to be this upcoming Thursday, usually 2 weeks after the draft. So could be wrong by the time this comes out. Maybe it's the following week or something like that. But I would assume, based on everything that we've heard, already with the Green Bay and Philly game kind of getting confirmed that they are going to have it wrapped up Monday or Tuesday night, and then you'll kind of start to hear some of these games leaked, and then it will be released this Thursday. A couple things that immediately stick out to me: home game against the Rams, home game against the Buffalo Bills, road games against the Houston Texans, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Dallas Cowboys. All five of those games are massive. They're absolutely massive. Houston, I'm going to have to see, kind of where they are. I think it is sometimes difficult to be an ascending team, much like the Lions were last year, to not have any hurdles that you got to overcome. They're in the AFC as well, so you know, uh, it just seems like it's always a more difficult road, kind of starting from the bottom, getting to the top of the AFC that they're going to have to go through. Um, and then, of course, San Francisco and Dallas, like those are massive games. I would like to kind of segment this out essentially to have game that I want to see the Lions open with, game that I want on Thanksgiving, and game I want the Lions to end with. Um,
Which we
and I'll
know for a
start
fact that's going to be a division game based on the NFL scheduling model. We know they're going to
exactly.
close against a division opponent no matter what.
So I'll just be honest. I want Green Bay at home to close out the regular season. I think that is the logical move. The Lions are going to have to defend home turf. Hopefully, we've got a couple game separation with Green Bay at that point. Um, but Green Bay, by all intents and purposes, should be in the playoff hunt. Hopefully, we're the team that's in first place. But just in the off chance that we're not, and we need the home crowd, I truly, truly feel like that could be a playoff kind of an environment and atmosphere. As far as the opening week, uh, the home game, or excuse me, the week one. Um, to be honest, I want to get another crack at Dallas, and I want to get a crack at Dallas right away. I know San Francisco and getting them would seem like the logical move. But Dallas has had our number in AT&T Stadium for a very, very long time. And I think they don't have a run game. And I like where our roster is at. And competitively, I think we have the defensive backs now that we didn't in last year's matchup to really give Dak Prescott problems. And I think we go into Arlington and we take the week one win, and we don't even have to think about the Cowboys anymore. For Thanksgiving, couple different ones, but honestly, Stafford and the Rams on Thanksgiving. I mean, that's another. That's one that just logically makes sense to me. I don't know as far as the CBS and Fox scenario if it has to be an AFC team this year or not. If it's an AFC team, it looks like it would be Jacksonville, the Titans, or Buffalo, and we've already had Buffalo, for a Thanksgiving Day game. So that just kind of off the rip here. The ones that I would go on the road to open at the Cowboys, the Rams for Thanksgiving, and home to close out the regular season against the Green Bay Packers.
So I'll take it in a little different direction here because I tend to agree with you, and I don't want to just spend a couple minutes regurgitating what you just said. But you bring up a good point in that the Thanksgiving game will be a big question mark because it will be a CBS, year doing the Lions because no matter who they play, the networks always alternate between the Lions and the Cowboys. So we had Fox last year when Green Bay came to town, so it'll be a CBS Jim Nantz and Tony Romo game this year. So I imagine that Buffalo will probably be the team that returns again this year. And the only reason I say that is because the Lions came so close to knocking them off 2 years ago that I think from a redemption standpoint, that'd be a nice story. I think from the AFC team standpoint, I think that's probably the best draw out of those three. I don't think Jacksonville moves the needle. I think Tennessee's in too much of a deep rebuild at this point to really make a big draw on Thanksgiving. I think Buffalo versus the Lions is the pick on Thanksgiving. I think there is a lot of different ways you can go with the opening week game. I think the Lions and Cowboys is an interesting pick. I think it's probably a likely pick. The question is, what do you do with them? I know that the Cowboys tend to be a popular selection for that first Sunday night football game of the year, but I also wonder if the NFL scheduling makers are going to utilize that to maybe feature one of the other big name teams around football if they think maybe the aura of the Lions has maybe fizzled out a little bit and they may not want to lead off with them right away. I think it could go a number of different ways, but I think the Lions and Cowboys pick on Sunday Night Football that week one probably makes a lot of sense just because, again, you tend to see Dallas in that spot. And to kind of round things out a little bit, I don't know who else you pick in that last game of the year. Minnesota made a lot of sense this year because based on how their roster stacked up versus the way the Lions were on that upward trajectory, it made the most sense to kind of feature them 2 games over a 3-week span. I think Minnesota has a little bit more in the way of question marks surrounding them this year to where I don't think that makes as much sense this year. I think Chicago will have a lot of sex appeal based on their draft from this year. I think it's going to be a much more star-laden roster than we've ever seen in Chicago in many, many years. But I don't know if the schedule makers necessarily buy into the hype just yet before they've even taken the field. Do I think Chicago will have their fair share of national TV games based on the hype surrounding their draft picks? I do. I just don't know that from a scenario where based on how these races are shaping up within the divisions that you have the ability to flex these games into that Sunday night on NBC. I just don't know if Lions and Bears would be the game that would really line up to decide a whole lot. Lions and Packers makes a lot of sense. And I think at Ford Field, where you've already had Lions need to go to Green Bay the last game of the season just a couple of years ago, they went out and got the job done. I think the NFL has no problem rewarding them with a home game, that final game of the season, in a game that actually means something. Could you imagine what that atmosphere would be like down at Ford Field?
I mean, it literally would feel like a playoff game. It really, really would. You've got the Lions looking for payback after the Thanksgiving Day game last year. So, yeah, I think of the scenarios that I laid out or what I wanted to see, I think it's the most likely. Because you're only picking from a couple of other teams. Let me ask you this though. I mean, I threw out the Cowboys on the road. You're talking Sunday Night Football. What about the Rams at the Lions to do Sunday Night Football? Could you
See,
see
that
that
was
as a
my
possibility?
that was my initial thought as you were going through yours. I was ready to say Lions would host the Rams on that first weekend of the year. And then I got to thinking as you were kind of going through your statement that, you know what, as I'm thinking back in time, you always seem to see the Cowboys right there on that first Sunday night. And it's usually against the Giants or somebody like that, regardless of what the records are. I think the NFL still, regardless of what the other storylines are around the NFL, I think the NFL kind of still goes back to its default of featuring the Cowboys ad nauseum, featuring the Giants, featuring the Eagles a little bit. You
Yeah.
still get your AFC opponents in there, maybe not so much the Chiefs because they'll be playing that Thursday night game, but I'm sure the Bills are going to be chomping at the bit to get on national TV early on. Same with the Ravens. I know the Ravens made a lot of waves last year with Lamar Jackson really, once again, living up to the hype after that contract extension. I think there are a lot of ways the NFL can go with that. I just don't know that the Rams and the Lions would be enough of a draw nationally in a regular season game. Now, mind you, it was a huge draw in the playoffs based on the storylines and Stafford's first return to Ford Field with something on the line. And the Lions have the ability to win a playoff game for the first time in a generation. The stakes aren't going to be quite the same this time around. So even though I was tempted to call that out as my pick, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, maybe that will wind up being a just your run of the mill Monday night game halfway through the season or something like that. I still think that's going to be one of your national TV games because I think every franchise is only allowed a maximum of 5 or 6 national TV games. And I think the Thanksgiving Day game counts toward that total.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. And I think the Lions are going to have, I honestly think we're going to get a whole bunch of Sunday night and Monday night games this year. I really do. Um, just off the heels of the draft, the popularity of the Lions, the ratings the Lions are getting. They might not be the Cowboys. They might not be the Chiefs. Jets and Giants, sure. New York market being what it is. But there is something special. And the Lions, I feel like they have a lot of sizzle still on the steak, kind of heading into the season.
So another direction I want to take this whole schedule business in, because again, I did double check just a moment ago, and even though, and this surprises me because you kind of have to make it a TV situation, and obviously with being able to block different programs at different times and whatnot, you at least want to have some type of heads up notice, but there still hasn't been an official set date of when the scheduled release TV program is going to be. The speculation, as you pointed out, Phil, is that it's going to be this coming Thursday, May 9th, but they don't know for sure. They're just basing that off of how it's been in recent years, having it 2 weeks after the draft. So, with that being the case, we don't know, but the reason we're touching on this and the length that we are is under the assumption that this is going to be our last episode we do before the schedule comes out. So, here's what I want to pivot to slightly. So, as I mentioned, the Lions have 9 home games versus 8 away games this year. So, that's going to be huge for all the Lions fans who are looking to get down to Ford Field. I'm sure the season tickets sold out for this year while last season was still going on. So it's going to be a matter of getting those one-off single game tickets, probably more than likely than not, through StubHub or through a third party or what have you. But as I was thinking just a couple of days ago, what will the NFL do to the Lions from an international game standpoint? The Lions have gone one of the longest periods of time out of any other team in the NFL without having to travel to overseas for a game, whether it be London, whether it be Germany. Now they're playing games in Mexico City. Now Brazil will kind of lead things off to start the year. And the NFL has essentially told you time and time again that the international games are here to stay. And in fact, they plan to expand their global presence by offering up even more international games than what we've seen in years past.
Do we know where the Germany game is this year?
I'm not even so sure that the Germany game is a thing this year. I know that they're going to have at least 4 London games. You're going to have the Brazil game, and I thought there was going to be Mexico City once again this year. I'm not sure if Germany was going to be a thing or not. Obviously, we'll find all that out in a few days once the schedule is released. But what I want to know is, would the Lions be forced by the NFL to give up one of their 9 home games to play a de facto home game in an international location? Would they really do that to this franchise?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, this is what happens when you have the schedule that kind of breaks this way. I don't know how that would actually work too, as far as season ticket pricing goes. We're getting, I pay on a monthly plan. I have 3 tickets. There's only one preseason game. So I kind of, I don't know how they, I don't know if it would be a refund situation or what,
Well,
but
they'd
I
have
feel
to
like
make
they
it right
have
by their
to,
fans. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Cause I mean, Well, what I was going to say earlier, though, is if there is a Germany game, as his star is ascending and he's the second highest paid wide receiver now, I would venture that the Lions would be the home team for a Germany game because of Amon-Ra St. Brown and his mom's heritage being German. So yeah, we'll have to see with that. I kind of feel like I would have been tipped off by the Lions by now, especially like we're probably on the week of the schedule release if it was going to be a thing. Only reason I say that is because of the Brazil game. So what, the Eagles are the home team for that?
The Eagles are the home game, yes.
So they would have probably have already have announced to their fans what the pricing breakout would be for season tickets and whatnot. So there's more than enough time before the regular season to start that they could do it retroactively, but yeah, that's kind of interesting.
So I'm looking at this right now because I want to make sure that we're accurate in our information here. So the Lions does not look like they will have to give up a home game this year. So the Carolina Panthers will be the host team for the Munich Germany game. So the Munich Germany game will be a thing once again this year. And the Panthers will be the home team, meaning that the Lions will not appear in that game because, well, Carolina's
Yeah.
not on the schedule. So that takes care of that one. And then you have the Jaguars, Bears, and Vikings
London.
who will host the London games. So could they force the Lions to go on the road and play one of these teams as one of their road games? That's definitely a possibility. It would mean either the Bears or the Vikings London games would be the two picks. I think historically the NFL has not opted to go the route of playing intradivisional games overseas. I just don't think that makes sense for anybody involved to do that. If there is, I can't think of any off the top of my head where you forced a team to go and play overseas within their own division. It just doesn't seem like that makes a whole lot of sense, though.
I want to. Who did the Dolphins play last year? Was it Dolphins Chiefs? Was it
That was Dolphins Chiefs. Yep.
okay? For some reason, I was thinking it was Dolphins Bills, but yeah.
And then obviously the Jaguars will be a home game for the Lions and not a host team in London. And I believe the Jaguars will actually play two games in London, which means that they will play their own home game, and I think they would play an away game as well, which again doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Actually, yeah, that would make sense because the Lions play the full schedule against the South this coming year. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
definitely see where the Jaguars would play their own quote unquote home game in London and then play either the Bears or the Vikings in London as well. Again, bizarre that Jacksonville opts to go that route every single year. I know Shad Khan, the owner for the Jaguars, has a lot of business dealings overseas and what have you. So clearly he thinks that's a business model that works well for him and his franchise. But that's what they opt to do every single year, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean they do have a devoted fan base, but it's not. I mean it's a pretty regional follow. There's not a ton of people from Jacksonville that move out to Denver. That are gonna go watch the Jaguars in a Denver Buffalo Wild Wings or something like that. So I kind of feel like a lot of people in Jacksonville just sort of stay in Jacksonville. It's not like Detroit, Chicago, any major East Coast city that you've got folks as transplants all over the place. But anyways, kind of going off base a little bit. Okay, well, I guess it won't be the Lions then um, for a home international game this year. But uh, I'm glad it sounds like it won't be the Bears and Lions for that though, because I think as the Bears are good, and I kind of feel like a rivalry will really start to kind of kick into gear here with them. Um, that that is a game that I want to circle on my calendar as one to possibly go to. depending on what day that might fall on.
And for all we know, it could be one of the last games to be played at Soldier Field with all the discussions of a new stadium coming in, whether they're going to force the residents of the Chicago area to foot the bill for about half of that plan. I think we're maybe headed towards a stalemate on that one. I'm not sure, but in any case, could be one of the last games we see at Soldier Field.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they definitely want to do some kind of dome setup. It looks like from what's been proposed. So, but they've kicked around about 20 different ideas here in the last 2 years. So we'll see.
You're listening to this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince and Phil along with you. Glad you could be with us once again for our first episode of the month of May. We are buzzing right through this off season here. I know that using a word like buzzing leads to maybe the implication that maybe we're like a hornet or a yellow jacket or something like that. So maybe I should say we're roaring through this off season. That probably makes a little bit more sense.
Well, also it's like warm outside, so you're talking buzzed. I mean, hey, you know what? What you choose to do while listening to this podcast on a nice summer day is totally up to your own discretion.
I mean, I know Cinco de Mayo was yesterday, but maybe you were forced to work on a Sunday or something like that. And this Monday morning is really the only day you're able to celebrate the holiday properly. So, in any case, we just ask that you do so responsibly. But in any case, we're glad you could be listening to this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. So, Phil, let's kind of take a moment and put a bow on the 2024 NFL Draft. I know we spent a lot of last week's episode getting into the particulars as it pertained to the Lions. Maybe take a broad view of maybe some players that you are most interested in from a fit standpoint around the NFL and just some things that stick out to you as we are now a little over a week removed from the NFL Draft.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the second round. I think a lot of the picks have already been kind of touched on in the first round a little bit here, but um, obviously Jim Harbaugh comes into the Los Angeles Chargers, kind of cleans out the wide receiver room a little bit. I know they still got the tall receiver from TCU the year before, but Johnston, yeah. They're going to be a run first team. I mean, I think that was pretty evident from, the pick of Joe Alt in the first round, getting Blake Corum a little bit later on in the draft. But the pick that really stuck out to me was Ladd McConkey near the top of the second round, I believe, with the second pick in the second round, because Justin Herbert can't throw the ball to himself. He probably would be able to catch it. He's a pretty good athlete if he had to, or if it was one of those kind of tip situations. But I think Ladd McConkey is a tremendous fit for that team. Sure hands, great route runner. I think he's going to give Herbert and the Chargers a little bit of freedom that they're going to want to run the ball, but when they do opt to pass, he's going to have a lot of volume and he's going to have some opportunities for him there. I think the downfall of Johnston the year before was that was more just like look at how big this guy is, and he's got the physical traits. Whereas Ladd McConkey, he's got great hands, and he does kind of all the things that Johnston sort of struggled with, to be honest. So I think that is an awesome fit in the second round for the Chargers and for Herbert, for Harbaugh. They're kind of remaking that offense a little bit on the fly. If you're looking from a fantasy football standpoint, he's definitely a rookie wide receiver that you're going to want to pay close attention to, and kind of moving from there.
And I think that in some cases, you can even take a look at the team who they share a building with. You already talked about the LA Rams. I almost kind of view McConkey as kind of like a poor man's Cooper Kupp in a sense that it seems like he always has a way of scheming himself open. And I feel like if you get a guy who can always get open in that Chargers offense, you obviously know that Jim Harbaugh is going to want to make the running game a part of what the meat and potatoes of that offense is. But if you have a guy from a change of pace standpoint that can constantly scheme himself open, that's a huge get for Herbert and the Chargers.
Yeah. So then I'm going to stick with the receiver position, the one that was kind of puzzling to me, just because he did have a pretty massive fall in the draft from, I think, where he was kind of slotted to how it ended up working out. um, is Troy Franklin, the receiver out of Oregon. He goes to the Denver Broncos, and he goes in I believe this is the fourth round, I think. Fourth round, yeah. So he fell all the way um, down to pick 102. Now he will get the added benefit of playing with his college quarterback in Bo Nix in Denver, but um, highly productive receiver at Oregon, and a guy that I thought really flashed from a physical standpoint. And I know he had some durability concerns, but you know, I think I guess I'm just a little leery about what, even though he's going to get the familiarity of playing with Bo Nix, and I know that's Sean Payton, and I don't want to write off Sean Payton after just one bad year in Denver, but I just feel like the Broncos and drafting wide receivers with Jerry Judy and some of these other guys that they've had in the past, um, it just hasn't materialized. And from a fit standpoint, that is something that, listen, that's awesome value in the fourth round. But um, I, if I was him, I would have wanted to be drafted by just about any other kind of situation, just because I don't think their quarterback situation is ideal. And I know Sean Payton's going to do everything he can to try to utilize him, and I'm sure he will play, pretty readily early on there in the Mile High City. But that is one that kind of stood out to me as a little bit of a questionable fit.
So I want to jump a little bit instead of maybe focusing on players. I kind of want to look at things from a team specific standpoint. And the only thing that we really did outside of the Lions last week was get into what the Falcons did with the Michael Penix Jr. selection at the number 8 overall position. And the more and more I think about it, you almost wonder how long it's going to take Penix to even sign with the Falcons. I mean, under the understanding that you are playing to get that second contract. And if you're in a situation where you're just sitting, when the time comes to negotiate for that second contract, you're probably not going to be in a position to get one if Cousins is out there playing some great ball. And the idea is to get stuff on film. So maybe if the Falcons don't necessarily want to be the one that pays him that money that next go around, somebody else will like enough of what they saw and step forward and sign him to be their quarterback of the future. And it's almost like a kid who goes to apply for a loan for, let's say, a car or something like that the week after he turns 18. The credit bureau is going to look and see this guy has absolutely no credit of any kind. In some cases, it's better to have bad credit as opposed to no credit at all. And the same analogy works from a film standpoint. If you're not on film, then nobody's going to want you because they're not going to base whether they're going to pay you good money off of what you did at the University of Washington by that point, a presidential administration ago. So I think we're in a situation where things could get a little dicey in Atlanta before they get better as far as things go at the quarterback of the future position. But that's as far into that as I'm going to get. I want to take a team who I think really set themselves up for another round of sustained success, and then also a team that missed the mark. And I'm actually going to stay within the same division of each other. So here's the team that I think absolutely nailed it from a draft standpoint, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that Howie Roseman is consistently in a position where he's proven to be one of the most adept and astute general managers in the NFL over these last several years. And I thought he did another phenomenal job in the draft this year. One of the biggest issues of the team last year, what was that, Phil? They just couldn't stop anybody, especially through the air. And kind of like what Brad Holmes did with the secondary this year, he doubled down on it and really made an effort to build up that secondary by taking Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, Cooper DeJean out of Iowa with 2 out of the first 40 picks. A player who I saw in some mock drafts getting projected by the Lions to take in the second round was Jalix Hunt, a linebacker out of Houston Christian University. fell to them at 94 overall. That's a third-round pick, so you could argue that's a steal by the Eagles, again, in an effort to build up that defense. They kept it in the family and took Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in the 5th round. Obviously, his dad had a very stellar career with the Philadelphia Eagles as their green sticker linebacker all those years back. And you go from having a backfield featuring DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Gainwell a year ago to now you have Saquon Barkley coming over within the division from the New York Giants, and you pick up Will Shipley, the running back from Clemson, in the 4th round. So now, kind of like how the Lions did a year ago, how they totally overhauled their backfield, you have the Eagles doing the same thing this year. And I think after kind of taking their lumps a little bit and maybe going through some growing pains with some new coordinators, I think with the draft they had this year, I think they really kind of put themselves back on the right track to move things forward again. For a team that maybe missed the mark a little bit, again, I'm going to stay within the division. I'm going to call out the Dallas Cowboys here. This is a situation where the Cowboys kind of knew that they were going to come to a crossroads as far as what are we going to do with some of our skill players. And what did they do? They took Tyler Guyton, a tackle out of Oklahoma, in their 1st round. Okay, that's just fine. But other than that, aside from adding maybe a corner here and a 6th round receiver there and maybe doubling down and adding some more line help, they did absolutely nothing to give Dak Prescott anything more to help with the offense. I think the biggest story of the week that you heard out of Texas was that they're going to run it back with Ezekiel Elliott because now that Tony Pollard's gone. And really, that's about it. So I want to know how Dallas got better over the last 10 days because I can't see it.
I don't think they did. I like Tyler Guyton, and I think he's going to bring something. I was just looking through it here to see if they had a 2nd round pick.
They took
And
that kid out of Western Michigan, I think, in the 2nd round.
okay. Oh, yeah. Marshawn Nealand. So it looks like they just missed the boat on kind of the top running backs in the draft before that pick. Interesting. So
They passed on Blake Corum.
yeah, they did. They did. It is kind of interesting they went edge with that 2nd pick because I don't know. You just hear some rumblings that, Micah Parsons and kind of what's going on there, and they might not want to pay him, if he's really just not a linebacker, and then how do you dispute what his contract is going to be if he's more of a rush uh, edge at this point.
I've
So
heard rumors they may let Parsons walk altogether.
yeah, so interesting though, but I don't think because we were just talking about veteran free agents that you signed before training camp to see if they've got a little bit of a portion of what they used to be. Um, Listen, I know New England was an absolute mess on offense. I did not see anything, absolutely anything. I'm pretty sure Ezekiel Elliott after like week 3 was on waivers, or to be able to be picked up in the 2 fantasy leagues I was in. No one touched him. No one has any confidence in him at this point, maybe outside of Jerry Jones. So if that's the move they want, well, hey, bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. Because the Eagles just look like they're going to just womp over that division right now.
And the thing that I can't fully understand either is, again, you want to put Dak Prescott, your quarterback, in a situation where he's going to thrive and excel. And it seemed like he gave everything he possibly could last year. It just wasn't enough. So it seems like you doubled down on that, kind of like the Eagles did with their secondary, the Lions did with their secondary. You take a problem and turn it into a strength. And I just don't know that Jerry Jones has proven himself to be a solid enough drafter over the years. So maybe I'm just holding him in too high of an expectation here than what's actually necessary or acceptable. It just seems like there was an opportunity to make the team better. I don't think they did. And you talk about Ezekiel Elliott. He had a high enough, I guess, by his standards, yards per carry his rookie year, and his yards per carry has lowered every single year since he's been in the NFL. So what on earth gives anybody any indication that having him around is going to be worth it? Especially when a running back position is a position now in this today's day and age NFL where you don't have a whole lot of tread left by the time you get to be Zeke's age.
Oh yeah. No, there's nothing in there. In fact, I actually thought he was already like 30 um, last year, but he is currently 28, so he will be turning 29 in July.
That still seems over the hill for a running back in today's NFL, though.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's all the mileage he had at Ohio State or what, but it just I don't know. It looked like he advanced to about 32 years old last year, as a running back, which you're DOA at that point.
Well, I'll tell you what, Zeke's going to do that motion where he's eating as he goes out there for that first game. Hopefully it's against the Detroit Lions, and we'll be able to feed Zeke some kneecaps, if you know what I'm talking about.
Big old DJ Reader.
There you go. There you go. So that's going to be it for us here on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We hope you enjoyed your serving this morning of kneecaps, as Phil and I enjoy dishing out week after week. We hope that next week we're talking to you about a brand newly revealed NFL schedule. We're not sure about it, but we're under the assumption that's going to be the case. So we're going to kind of play by ear what next episode is going to entail. But in any case, we appreciate you being along for the ride, and we will talk to you in any case next week. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning. Go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.